Well, good morning and welcome to Sunnyside Online, where we are still a people following Jesus to those not yet. That's right. I just heard a bunch of people echo that all throughout the city of Colorado Springs. So good to have you guys. Just a reminder, same mission, just different method of being able to go about that. And that's a good thing. Super excited about what we're able to accomplish and what we're doing right now, gathering online instead of in person. So I appreciate you all being here. You know, last week we kicked off a series called Hope. And if we're being honest with ourselves, that's the one thing that the world needs now most of all. It's also probably one of the things that we as followers of Jesus need to be reminded of most of all. As a matter of fact, there's a guy named Peter, one of the closest friends of Jesus while he was here on this earth, and he echoes those very words to us in 1 Peter chapter 3. He says, instead, we must worship Christ as the Lord of our life. That's where it all begins. We got to start with that. It says, and if someone asks you about your hope as a believer, always be ready to explain it. You see, we're instructed to always be ready to give an answer for the hope that we have. And the problem is that oftentimes we are probably not as versed, we're not as well prepared to be able to give the reason for our hope, and that's what this whole series is about. Not just to remind you, but also to equip you, to help us understand what we have hope in. And the very first thing that our hope is in is obviously Jesus. It's in Him. That's what we talked about last week. It starts and begins there. He is the initiator of hope. Apart from Jesus, we have no hope. But understanding that, it goes further than that as well. You see, one of the most incredible things about our God is His innate ability to take bad things and cause good to happen from them. For Him to be able to redeem things that are inherently evil or bad and make something good happen from that. And that's what we're actually going to be taking a look at today. Is we're going to be taking a look at the God of opportunity and how we actually have hope in opportunity. This actually comes from a passage in Romans 8, verse 28. Many of you guys are very familiar with it. Let's take a look at it here. It says, and we know that God causes everything, all things, not a single thing that God cannot cause, to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to His purpose. That's His M.O. That is the kind of God that we serve. He's able to take anything, your worst situation, whether it be something that someone's done to you or a circumstance like we happen to find ourselves in right now, and He's able to actually cause good things to happen because He's a God of opportunity. We actually see this in the person of hope that I want to talk to you guys today about. This guy's name's Joseph. Joseph from the Old Testament, not Joseph and Mary. And so many of you guys know the story, but just to give you a quick background, Joseph happened to be the favorite son of a group of 12, and his brothers didn't like that, and so they mistreated him. They actually sold him into slavery. He ended up with some good fortune. He ended up in a good house with a good job, but then some misfortune. Got accused of doing some stuff that he didn't do. Ends up going to prison. Now he's in prison. He does a solid for some guys, interprets some dreams. He's thinking, this is going to help me get out. But then they forget him in prison. So again, more bad stuff. Finally, he ends up getting out of prison, but then he ends up entering into a famine. So this like worldwide famine that happens to happen. Now, he's ahead of the game because he's able to interpret the dreams, and so he's able to help Egypt to be able to take care of this. But all the surrounding worlds are actually enduring this incredible bad time at this point in time. And so if anybody knew about hope and opportunity, it was our guy Joseph. And we understand this because of his perspective that he offers us toward the end of his story. And his perspective happens to be how he sees God in each one of these situations. In Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, he gives us this insight as he's having a conversation with his brothers. His father's just died. They think that he's going to kick them out because, all the bad things that they have done to him. But instead, this is what Joseph says. He says, you intended to harm me, but God intended for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. You see, what you wanted to be caused from evil and your evil intentions, God actually is able to take and make something good happen from it. Now, a lot of people are trying to make sense of things right now. And maybe you happen to fall into that category. You might be asking yourself, why is God allowing this to happen? Or maybe even, is God causing this to happen, and you have all these theological things that are floating through your head. And here's what I can tell you. I can't say definitively if or why God has caused or allowed this to happen. There are people who would fall on either side of that theological fence, and I have my own opinions. I'm happy to chat with you about some of those things if you would like to. But I think that's actually the wrong perspective. That's the wrong question. We can ask those things. God's big enough to handle those things. But what I think God wants us to know right now is what we can be confident in. So not necessarily the things that we can't see, but the things that we actually know to be true. And this is what I can tell you. I'm confident in these things, even though I'm not sure of that previous question that I posed. And this is what I can say, that God sees more than we do. He sees further than we do. He sees better than we do. He is bigger than us, and He's got this. Like I'm confident in that. The second thing I can tell you is that God is capable of using His abilities to cause all things to work for our good and for His glory, because that is what we have seen Him do time and time again throughout history. That's what I personally witnessed Him do in my life, and you've probably seen Him do the same thing. So whether or not God's actually responsible for this, I know that He can use it. Now, what people have meant for evil, God's able to create good from. Circumstances that seem overwhelming, He creates overcomers. Things that have marked us in the past, He uses to propel us to purpose. Situations that are devastating, He uses to wake people up from a deep slumber. C.S. Lewis puts it this way. He says, we can ignore even pleasure, but pain insists upon being attended to. In other words, like when pain comes, when difficulties come, when disasters come, like that gets our attention, right? He says, God whispers to us in our pleasures. He speaks in our conscience, but He shouts in our pains. It is His megaphone to rouse a deaf world. And I think not only a deaf world, but also a sleeping church. I think that the pain that we're enduring right now is actually God's megaphone to the world to try to get our attention and to awaken people, both those that are not yet, to a God who loves them, and the church to rise from their slumber and be able to be all that God has caused them to be. And so I got to pose this. If our hope is in Him and He is a God of opportunity, then guys, we should be a people of opportunity, seeing opportunity in every situation, good and bad, to be able to bring glory to God. I have some friends of mine that I introduced you guys to several weeks back. They're originally from Mexico, but they're doing global work in China. And obviously, this is a time and a place where it's not good to travel. China was the kind of the place where this originated, and they have just been itching and can't wait to get back to the people of China. And there's a lot of people around them, family, friends, loved ones, church members, that are going, why are you going? Why do you want to go right now? Why can't you just stay put and be here and be safe and be secure? And it's because they understand this God of opportunity and that they are supposed to be people of opportunity, because there is no better time than right now to go to a place that has been shaken up. They are unstable, they are insecure, they don't know what side is up, and that's kind of how a lot of the world is right now. But specifically in China, there are doors of opportunity that are available to them. And they just want to go. They want to be there. So I want to ask, because they're having some troubles making flights and arrangements, I want to ask that you would pray for them, that they would be able to get there, and that doors of opportunities would be opened up for them in the coming days. Now, speaking of China, there's actually some Chinese characters. I think it was JFK who was kind of popularized for making this statement. But there's two characters that make up the word crisis in the Chinese language. It's a misnomer. Some people say it's danger and opportunity that make up crisis. That's actually not true. It's danger and a critical moment that make up this idea of crisis. But even though it doesn't necessarily have opportunity in it, when you look at the critical moment, that is in itself an opportunity, because it's at that point of crisis we as followers of Jesus have the opportunity either to dive into or to veer away from. And right now, guys, I think that we've got to dive into. You see, many people right now are only looking at the problem and trying to figure out the solution to the disease. And I got to tell you, yeah, it's bad. It's not a good thing. We need to hear the caution and the wisdom of those who are speaking in. Yes, it will have negative effects on our economy, and it has already had negative effects on people's health, especially our elderly, and I get that. As bad as this situation is, and we need to understand that, I just want to challenge us that if we are people of God and He's a God of opportunity, we should be looking for the opportunities in the midst of this problem. So a question I want you guys to wrestle with right now is this. What are the opportunities that you can see? I'm actually going to give you a moment to do this. Whether you're watching this on our online platform and you're able to participate in the chat, I want you to throw in some of your thoughts and your ideas in that chat program so we can see those. Maybe you're at home and you're watching this after the fact. Write those things down. Or maybe you got some other people at your house. Have some conversations with them. But what are some of the opportunities that you can see? Let's have a dialogue about that. And then I'm going to come back and share with you some of the opportunities that I see. Welcome back, guys. What I'd like to do right now is, I know this is a message, it's a sermon, if you will, but I'd like to step inside of your living room or wherever you happen to be watching this from, and I just want to have a conversation with you. I want to dream with you a little bit, and I want to share some of the hopes that I see, the opportunities, if you will, some of the things I'm not just like wishful of, I'm confident that are going to come from this. I've been thinking a lot about this and having conversations with people, and I truly believe in it. We're already seeing some of this stuff happen, and so I want to walk you through a couple of those things, so just hang in there with me. There's a pastor and a leader, his name's Craig Rochelle, and he gave a leadership lesson here recently where he posed the thought that constraints are actually the thing that gives way to creativity. It's what causes creativity. And so it's not necessarily free thinking, but forced thinking that actually causes you to think outside of the box or think creatively inside of the box, however you want to say that. And because of that, those restraints that are placed on people, like what we're experiencing right now, actually lend themselves to causing greater degrees of creativity and ideas to form and fashion. As a matter of fact, throughout history, some of the best ideas have come from forced thinking. In other words, there has been a need in place, and people have come up with ideas to help with that particular need. For instance, I was watching a show the other day, and they were talking about the invention of the plane, which is awesome, but what happened is as they started using planes in combat, then you had these pilots that were left helpless when their planes got hit, and so basically they were losing pilots left and right, and so out of that need came the idea of a parachute. And so like this great idea of a parachute came out of the need of these pilots. So with that being said, I think that that's actually what's going to happen here within the church, and we see this already happening. I truly believe that some of these restrictions will push the church into one of the most creative periods in our church's history. And we're seeing stuff happening already with online movements and conversations and chat rooms, doing things electronic, helping people understand what discipleship looks in their homes. Like there's all sorts of creativity that's already emerging just within the last 2 weeks of these kind of constraints. And things are going to continue to well up. And so a lot of people were asking the question, you all might be thinking this too, is like, can you do church if you don't gather in person? Can you do it online? The answer is a resounding yes, and in some respects, like we might even be able to do it better. The church has left the building that it was never supposed to be confined to in the first place. And so we are starting to ask questions that, quite honestly, we should have been asking for years and decades. And just now we're starting to have some of those forced conversations. But I can tell you, it's hard to shift from the familiar for no good reason. And that's where we've been, and this is what we've been doing, and this is how church is supposed to be done. And so when you're not having constraints, it limits our creativity. But now, with those limitations placed on us, it's going to force us into a place to tap into our creativity that we've not done for a long, long time. And so throughout church history, what you need to know is that the church, by and large, has stepped into gaps. And these situations that we're in right now are creating lots of gaps and lots of holes and lots of needs. And now it's time for the church to step into those gaps creatively. You think throughout history of hospitals and orphanages and higher education, places of higher education and the pursuit of mathematics and science. A lot of those institutes and those organizations, those things were actually formed by followers of Jesus who saw a need and then creatively came up with concepts to fill those needs. Right now, we get a chance to step in to those kind of things. And so I've got hope, guys, that some of the best ideas will emerge through this crisis. But it's just not creativity that I can see. I have hope in the opportunity of creativity, but I also have hope in the opportunity that we have to actually make our faith our own, to transfer, if you will, the mission of the church onto us individuals. Now, if you've been around me for any length of time, especially here at Sunnyside, you understand, I keep pushing on this subject, but we will not accomplish our mission unless you take onus of the mission yourself. And so we have to do a better job of empowering you to do the work of the disciple, or else we're not going to succeed at our mission, at following Jesus to those that are not yet. And I had a friend I was talking with the other day about this, and he was making an argument about the fact that we should continue to gather together in person, even if it threatens us with this virus. And I understand his sentiments, and I understand where he's getting. He doesn't want to neglect the gathering. But as I was responding to him in an email, I started to write out all the things that I'm seeing happen right now because of the constraints that we have on us. And so here are things that I wrote down. I see people worshiping in their homes, not waiting to go to worship. I see families learning and reading the Bible together, parents to kids and kids to siblings and husbands to wives. I see people extending care to their neighbors and actually getting to know them at levels that they had never had before. I see young people being deployed to check in on their elders. That's actually happening here. You all might have received one of these phone calls, but our youth, because they're not gathering like they are right now, they want to be useful, they want to have purpose, and so we've given them a list of some of the 60-plus people that are part of our church, and they've been making calls just to check in on people. Man, I love seeing that happen. But we see people sharing their hope with the flowering world, and at the same time communing with each other, not weekly, or sometimes, for some of us, monthly. We don't even show up to church every Sunday as it is. But we see people actually getting together more often, more frequently, daily through text and phone and email and other platforms instead of simply gathering at church on Sunday. And I got to thinking to myself, doesn't that sound like the church? To me, it sounds like a better, more fruitful church than some of us have actually experienced. And so being able to transfer the mission and the onus to people, man, that is such an important thing to accomplishing the mission that we have here at Sunnyside. And right now, we have an opportunity to be able to do that, and people are taking it up on themselves. Now, it's not just the mission of reaching people that are not yet. It's also the mission and transferring our onus to disciple our kids in our home. And I've been a long time proponent of understanding that it's our job as parents to be the primary disciplers of our kids, to help them through that. But I've had kind of a rude awakening with both my kids being removed from school and having to stay at home, and now I'm having to work at home. I've started to realize that, man, we have abdicated our responsibility a lot more than what we would probably like to know. I know myself personally, I've done that as well. Let the teacher educate them. Let the coaches provide structure and character. Let the church disciple them. Let the counselor help them to process through the things that they're going through. But what happens when you can't send them to someone else and you're all that they have? Are they still going to get those things that are so valuable to them? The things that you were actually created to instill in them. So, man, I've been looking at this and taking that opportunity to transfer that back to me. And I know that through this situation, I'm going to take this opportunity and be more intentional in the coming days, both to nurture my kids and help them understand and process through their emotions and feelings. My wife had them write some poems out the other day about how they're feeling about this thing, and I realized that they're scared. I've not had that conversation. I've not sat down with them, whether I've been kind of aloof to it and preoccupied with trying to do what we're doing here, or I've just not sat down and helped them process through that it's okay for them to be scared, but it's also okay for them to be confident that there's a God who can take care of them, and He's able to take these things and make good things happen from them. I've also seen this happen just in our own Bible study. I'm kind of ashamed to admit this, but in the past 2 weeks, I've probably read the Bible more with my kids in the past 2 weeks than I have the whole year up to this point. And a large part of that is because I've just been home. I've been present. I've been forced to do this. And we've been doing those D1 daily times. I actually got to do that with Keely the other day. And I came down and actually saw my son reading the Bible to his baby sister while she's eating breakfast the first thing in the morning. And I love that. And I saw that. And I'm thinking to myself, if I'm not doing this with them, I don't get to see those things actually transfer to others. And so, guys, I have hope that people will own their faith and our mission on a personal level like never before, all because of this crisis that we happen to be in. Guys, I have hope that we will become more generous than we have ever been before. We see this actually happening in Paul's letter to the Corinthians, 2 Corinthians. He's talking to this church in Corinth, but he's actually referencing this church in Macedonia. And this is what he says to them. He says, "Now, brothers and sisters, we want you to know about the grace that God has given the Macedonian church." Let me brag on this church for a little while. He says, in the midst of a very severe trial, this is not good times for them. This is not like, best economy stuff. Like they're going through some deep stuff, not unlike what we're going through right now. He says their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity. For I testify that they gave as much as they were able and even beyond their ability, entirely on their own. They urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in this service to the Lord's people. And they even exceeded our expectations. They gave themselves first to the Lord and then by the will of God to us as well. Guys, I can see this as clearly as I can see my hand right in front of me. I have confidence in this. This is not a wishy-washy hope. This is a confidence in knowing that God is going to do this through His people, just like He did in the church of Macedonia. When the rest of the world holds tight to the stuff that they have with clenched fists, we will open up our hands. When the rest of the world starts to hoard, we will share. When they start to worry about their economy, we will put our trust in our God, who is our provider in the first place. That is how it is. That is how it always has been, but now we have an opportunity to be able to show it even more. Guys, I have hope. I have confidence that you and I will grow in generosity like never before. Now, many of you guys know this economic principle. If you've got a 401k or you got a 403b, right now, even though it may look like it's a lot lower, ultimately the tide will turn and eventually it'll kind of catch up, and some of us are at different places in life. But what happens is whenever things are down like this, the market's down, when you invest money into that portfolio, what you're doing is you're actually buying up more stocks, and so you're getting more for more bang for your buck, if you will. And so what it is it's an investment in the long term. And so the more that you put in, the greater dividend that you actually get from this. And I truly believe that is how it is with us in generosity in this moment. The more that we give right now, the more that we're faithful right now, the more that we sacrifice right now, when it hurts, when we're insecure, it's going to gain greater dividends in the generous people that we are becoming in Christ. And so I know a lot of you guys are scared. I am too. But it's when we're scared that there's no better time to trust God with the things that He's put in our possession in the first place. As a matter of fact, He makes promises to us about us being faithful in these times. And so regardless of your situation, and I don't know if you're laid off or you're worried about reduction in pay or any of those kind of things, like those are conversations that all of us are having right now. I just want to encourage you to continue to put your trust and be faithful to the Lord so that He can in turn provide for your daily needs, the things that you need, the things that are necessity. That's His promise. If you're faithful with your first and your best, that He will actually take care of the rest. In addition to that, as you're doing this, and you maybe even go a step and beyond faithfulness, man, your generosity is going to grow. It's going to abound. Not only that, the world around us is going to be able to see that, and they're going to see us giving stuff away, and they're going to go, what in the world do you have that I need? That's the hope that we have, and it's the opportunities that we're going to take. Now, I don't want you all to think that this is just us saying this to you. I also want you to know that we as a church are actually preparing ourselves for this too. Now, this is scary times for us as a church without meeting in person, and a lot of us not giving online. We only have about 40% of the population of our church that give online. We want to encourage those of you that do give and make this is a part of your home, and you want to be a part of this mission to try giving online. But you have to understand that this is a scary time for us as an entity as well. But with that being said, we want to make dividends in the generous church that we're going to be. And so we've got this Those Not Yet Fund. A big portion of what we have in there right now is going towards our environments. We are going to finish up the children's area, but we're going to reallocate some of that funding to be able to help as a relief fund for the aftermath of what is going to happen through, we know people's jobs are going to be in jeopardy and lack of pay and issues and all that kind of stuff. We're going to stand in the gap as a church, as an entity. And first and foremost, for those of you all that call this place home, but also for our community and maybe meeting some of the needs of our city. And so if you want to be able to give above and beyond to the Those Not Yet Fund, it's going to go directly towards that relief portion in the coming days and weeks ahead. The last thing that I see is urgency. Last thing I see is urgency. Without disease, without death, without disaster, there would be no urgency in life. We would be comfortable. We'd be familiar. We would be set in our ways. And a lot of us, especially those of us that live in America, that's already set in. We need things like this. As bad as it is, we need things like this just to shake us up, to get us out of the comfortable, and to actually push us through our hesitancies and our incompetencies to an urgency that Paul he models and mimics for us. We actually see him demonstrating an urgency that should be envied, a perspective that urges us to make the most of every single opportunity that we have. You see, urgency is initiated in times of uncertainty. We should have the urgency of Paul. Now, I'm not one of those guys that's doom and gloom. I don't personally think that the world is coming to an end. I don't necessarily think that this stuff is signs of end times. Could it be? Absolutely. It absolutely could be the beginning of those things. But this is what I would tell you. As followers of Jesus, we should live with an urgency that tomorrow is the day that Jesus comes back. Or for that matter, tomorrow is the last day that I actually have on this earth. And so whether Jesus comes back or whether I breathe my last breath, either one, we need to have a higher sense of urgency that causes us to be able to push through the hesitancies we have. And I truly believe that a situation like this that causes us to look at the world that we live in, and it's uncertain and it's unsteady, and there are people literally that we love and that we know that are getting sick and dying that we can't have contact with. This is going to create a greater sense of urgency to be able to have conversations with people that we wouldn't have had otherwise. I have hope, I have confidence that our urgency will start to outweigh our hesitancy. So with that being said, guys, I want to land the plane here a little bit, and I want to close this with a passage that Paul writes to the church in Colossus. And he writes to them in Colossians chapter 4, verse 2 through 6. I love what he has to say about making the most of opportunities. And so I'm going to read this passage, and then we're actually going to close in a time of guided prayer. So take a look at this with me together. It says, devote yourselves to prayer with an alert mind and a thankful heart. First of all, Paul is wise in this. When in doubt, let's go to God in prayer. But he also says with an alert mind and a thankful heart. In other words, God is a God who not only hears our prayers, he cares enough to hear them, but he's also a God who's big enough to do something about it. And that's why he says, pray for us too, that God will give us many opportunities to speak about his mysterious plan concerning Christ. You see, when we pray the things that we know that God already wants, and he wants people to come to know him, he wants people to know the hope that we have in him, he's going to give us opportunities like this. So if you start praying prayers like that, make sure you keep your eyes open, because he's going to give you opportunities. But that is why I am here in chains. Pray that I will proclaim this message as clearly as I should. That goes back to what we were seeing Peter echo, that we are prepared to be able to share the reason for our hope. And at least now we've got two things that we're prepared to share: our hope in Him and our hope in the opportunities that He provides. Live wisely among those who are not believers, those that are not yet, and make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation be gracious and attractive so that you will have the right response for everyone. Guys, that is our hope and our prayer. That during this trying time, during this coronavirus pandemic, the uncertainty and everything else that lives around, the world needs the hope that we have to offer, and there are going to be opportunities in this. And if we can just keep ourselves from getting self-centered, from keeping our minds being only concerned about our own situation and circumstance, God is going to provide opportunities, and He's waiting for us to make the most of those opportunities. My heart and my prayer is that we would be a church, we would be a people that would make the most of every opportunity, because we are a people that serves a God of opportunity. So what I want to do right now is I want to take you through kind of a guided prayer time. This is actually sent to me from one of the people from our congregation. Please, by the way, when you find awesome stuff, just send it my way so that we can continue to be creative and share things that are going to be encouraging to us. But I thought these words written by somebody else, they're prayers that other people have prayed, are just incredibly valuable. And so we've included that in the resource section of the online platform. You can download that, pull that, put it on your phone, whatever you want to do. I would encourage you to read through this and pray through these prayers throughout the next couple of weeks on your own, but I'm going to guide you through those right now. So God, please intervene and help our land and all the lands where this virus is passing. God, please help researchers to develop a vaccine and do that quickly and effectively. God, please help doctors to develop treatments. God, please empower the idea of social distancing to prevent the spread of this disease and slow the rate of infection so that our medical systems won't be overwhelmed. God, give our governments and healthcare industries the power to provide the test that we need. God, protect our healthcare workers worldwide. God, please inspire believers to set the example of selfless courage during the pandemic. God, please repair the economic damage and help workers and business owners overcome their loss of income. God, please help churches overcome spiritual and economic impacts that befall them because they are not able to meet in person. God, please remove the infection from vulnerable countries without adequate medical care. And God, please remove this virus from the whole earth because we know that you can. So, Father, I don't know exactly what you're going to do through all this. I just know what you're capable of. And so that's what I ask of you. I do pray that you would remove this virus, but I also pray that you would use this pandemic and this crisis that we happen to be in to cause us as a church to be awakened. Father, for us to be more creative than we have ever been so that we can be more effective than we have ever been. Father, for us to become more generous through this, that it would pay off in the dividends of giving generosity to determine the kind of people that you want us to be ultimately, Lord. I just pray that you give us a sense of urgency that we have not had and be able to have that conversation or broach that subject with somebody about the hope that we have. And Father, that you would allow us to be fully empowered and that the transfer of this mission would come upon us so that we can be the kind of people that follow you everywhere that you call us to go, that we can love our families and teach them your words, Father, that we can love on your neighbors and be able to direct them to your hope. It's in Jesus' name we pray these things. Amen. Don't forget, guys, we are people following Jesus to those not yet.